Hey all, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Julie and I make content typically surrounding mental health, music, as well as makeup. Today's video is personal. I know I've made a good amount of videos on mental health issues I struggle with, such as social anxiety, agoraphobia, as well as some of my disordered eating history. I hope it doesn't get tiresome that there are more videos I could make and that there are other things I deal with, because it doesn't seem reasonable to have all these conditions, but I'm going to explain how this is more plausible and makes a lot of sense that they're cohesive and interrelated today. So I've been waiting for this diagnosis for a long time. It's something that I've wanted to talk about. It's something that I've suspected, although I know you can't diagnose yourself and I know ethically I wouldn't want to do that, and it's important because I can be biased to get the opinion of a professional. I've been seeing my therapist since last October. I see her twice a week. So she's gotten to know me a lot, and I've done a lot of work where I've talked a little bit about my trauma. I've had trouble getting into certain ones and realized I wasn't ready to process trauma and needed to work toward addressing my coping skills and emotions and day-to-day struggles and situations, and that's been more helpful in my treatment currently. Although I do plan to process my trauma, it's something that's going to take time. Prior to this therapist, my documented diagnoses, which I mentioned in my TMS video, are PTSD, panic disorder with agoraphobia, and major depressive disorder recurrent. Now, I'm not saying that those diagnoses are not accurate. It's just that they all fall under one thing, which is kind of what I suspected all along. So I'm just going to say it, and it's hard to say, although I do feel good about knowing what's going on to navigate my treatment options and better understand what's happening to me or what I've endured in my life and how I relate to other people who have struggled. I have complex PTSD. As of yesterday, I was officially diagnosed. You cannot bill insurance for it currently because it's not in the DSM-5, but it is acknowledged in the ICD-11. It is a valid diagnosis in the field. I've learned about it at my grad school residency lectures from therapists who acknowledge it in the field and how it's a prevalent issue, especially among children who've suffered long-term abuse at home. It is on the rise. I can make a video specifically going into the differences between PTSD versus complex PTSD. For now, I'm just going to go into how it fits me. So from what I've read, with complex PTSD, people are more likely to dissociate. It's not required that you have the symptom of dissociation or depersonalization to qualify for a PTSD diagnosis. You just need to experience flashbacks and that sort of dysregulation, whereas in complex PTSD, flashbacks and dissociation both tend to occur. A lot of people with complex PTSD tend to exhibit avoidance behaviors and isolate further on in life due to their traumatic experiences in childhood or afterward. And I definitely identify with this. How my therapist explained she came to this conclusion was she does consult with another therapist and they're in agreement on it. I deal with agoraphobia and social anxiety is clinically called social phobia. So these are both phobias, and I learned a while ago and agree with my therapist that phobias are interrelated to trauma and that my phobias are a result of trauma, which I didn't fully get into in either video, but I'm not going to hide it and I'm going to get into that today. Depression and anxiety are also a huge part of PTSD in general, but definitely complex PTSD as well. I deal with a lot of guilt and shame toward my condition and my feelings toward others when they're negative or I feel irritable and upset. And that all ties into my diagnosis as well. I'm not going to go into details of my traumas. I don't want to be too triggering, but I'm going to sort of vaguely state what things I've been through. With complex PTSD, it is usually multiple traumas someone's endured in their life, but usually they tend to be long-term. However, the discrepancy is a lot of resources say, oh, it has to be long-term childhood abuse, neglect, but that's not always the case because trauma is up to the perception of the person, and some things I went through that feel traumatic or that my brain and body have processed as traumatic may not be for someone else, and that is totally valid. But for me, these things were interpreted and processed as trauma, and they still affect me to this day, which can be very difficult. From ages 6 until just about last year, I was bullied. I dealt with bullying. I dealt with cyberbullying. It was mostly emotional. This was invalidated for a long time. Oh, at least no one beats you up, or yeah, kids can be mean and that sort of thing. And then into my 20s, a lot of people were like, yeah, when you're 18, you just get over it. Everyone gets bullied, so what? And no, r/things have cured, great, thanks, now I can snap out of it. That's not how mental health works. That's not how trauma works. And you don't compare traumas, and we don't invalidate other people's traumas. And we know this from trauma-informed care. This is not how anyone should be approaching it with friends. Just because you feel like you had it worse than someone else doesn't mean it's okay to invalidate what someone else went through. Because of the bullying, that to me is where the agoraphobia and the social anxiety come from. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm perfect. I've definitely hurt people and engaged in bullying behaviors myself over time. I'm not going to say, well, I was traumatized, so that's what happens. Yeah, that's an explanation for my behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. And I deeply regret some of my mistakes I've made along the way, but I'm doing my best to forgive my trauma perpetrators as well as to forgive myself for the mistakes that I've made. And I have also reached out to some people and apologized over time to kind of make peace and get that closure and give them that closure as well. The depression and the anxiety are something I dealt with prior to certain traumas, but they definitely exacerbated and became more severe and persistent as I started to endure more traumas. I endured more traumas throughout my 20s. I feel like the bullying got worse in certain aspects, became more hurtful, because for me the most hurtful type of bullying is when it's your friends talking about you behind your back, which I found out a lot of the time. If you don't like me, why are you my friend? You know, like that hurts. Or I would have falling outs with friends. I've had a lot of tumultuous relationships, breakups, friendships, whatnot, and all those things have been processes, traumas, and all those things have deeply affected me and made it a struggle to form and maintain healthy relationships with others, although I have made improvements with that over time and have a lot of healthy, wonderful people in my life now. What would happen is I would have a falling out with someone and they would hate me and they would team up with other people who hated me and they would bully me and they would make fun of me, and there's people that literally hate me so much, maybe a handful, that they would want to ruin my life, which is really scary. And I have realized that no one's going to tear me down. I'm a strong, resilient person. I'm hardworking, and I'm going to pursue my goals and dreams, and no one's going to take that away from me because I've worked really hard to be a better person and be a good mental health clinician. I feel bad for them. I feel bad that people put so much negativity in trying to hurt someone else to make themselves feel better, to pursue that negative attention, to team up with other toxic people and not realize that they're toxic and other people are toxic as well. And again, I'm not judging. I've been there. I've done things that I regret, but it doesn't make it okay. So I'm not going to get super into like certain bullying incidents and things like that, but vaguely, like I said, the bullying is probably one of the things that's affected me the most. Breakups and friendships ending as well. Beyond this, this is hard to say, and I'm not going to get triggered and get into details, but I am a sexual assault survivor. I don't like to call myself a victim. I like to look at it as that I'm a survivor. I've made it out of it. I'm resilient. I have a healthy relationship now, and it's not something I fear happening again because I will never put myself in a situation like that, and I know how to be more careful, and I know how to look out for red flags and warning signs. And yes, this can happen from a stranger, but it can also happen from a trusted friend. It can happen from someone that you're dating. People don't realize that there's a fine line, and coercion and pressure and things like that absolutely count if you perceive it that way, if you perceive it as something that was not comfortable to you, and that can really stick with you. I have dealt with a lot of flashbacks and insecurities and struggles. Beyond the toll that sexual violence can take on someone, abusive relationships can take many forms. They are not always physical, and although that's more apparent, emotional abuse can be really hard because a lot of people can invalidate it and say, yeah, well, at least they didn't hit you. Yeah, it could have been worse. And also friendships and families and people in your life can be abusive. Bosses, there's a lot of people that can fall under that. If people are manipulating you, if they're gaslighting you, if they're invalidating you, and you communicate and stick up for yourself and that does not change, it absolutely can traumatize you and can be processed as a trauma depending on who you are and how you feel about certain things. I have endured some abusive relationships a few years ago. There was one especially that I won't get into, and I was single for 4 years after that because I had so much to work on. 2015 in general was a really tough year, and I was completely traumatized that whole year, worse than I'd ever been in my entire life. And shortly after, that's when I was diagnosed with PTSD. However, now that I have the complex PTSD diagnosis, it explains so many of my symptoms. It explains so many of these comorbid overlaps. So instead of saying I have this, and this, just saying I have complex PTSD kind of summarizes everything that's been going on. It shows me I'm not alone and that other people have been through these things too. And I have read that bullying is absolutely an aspect, because it's a long-term abuse, or it can be, and it was for me, that can deeply affect kids. And it's a crisis now. It puts kids at risk of mental health issues and suicidality and self-harm and so many things that we need to be monitoring and looking out for. And bullying was not dealt right with me when I was in school, and it's really frustrating. And it seems like it's better nowadays somewhat, but I was in it. I was in a school, and there were injustices and things that happened that I was not okay with, that I was powerless against, and there was nothing I could do. And that makes me feel sick to my stomach. It makes me feel sick to my stomach that we're still traumatizing kids to this day. We know about it, and we're just saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. But anyway, that's a rant for another day. I just wanted to be open about this and be open that I don't look at this diagnosis as a death sentence. I don't look at it as I have all these limitations and I'll never get better and I'm hopeless and there's things I can't do. I look at it as I have a condition. I know what's going on now. I know how to treat it. I know that I'm doing the right things to care for myself. I know what my goals need to be. One of my goals in therapy has been working on my self-esteem, because self-esteem and self-worth can really be shattered by enduring traumas in your life and being afflicted with this condition, as well as other mental health issues. And that's been really therapeutic and helpful for me. So I would love to make more videos on this topic. I love speaking openly about what I deal with, because beyond pursuing being a therapist, I'm also 100% a mental health advocate and will always have a passion in my heart for reaching others and teaching them about mental health and sharing my story to show people that they're not alone and there are people out there that relate to you. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I also take video suggestions, and I would love to speak with you either in the comments or on my social medias. My Instagram is Julie_counseling. My Twitter is Julie Counseling with no underscore, and my Facebook page will be linked down below as well. I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye guys.